G'day you cheeky dogs and welcome to Rusty Week,
Rusty!
where we have been doing videos about Rusty and specifically the episode Cricket all week long. And today's video is actually a Bluey theory video.
Bluey!
And it's going to be all about whether or not Rusty's family is poor in comparison to the other families in Bluey. Now all of this information comes from the episode Cricket, and in particular when we see Rusty's house.
This episode of Bluey is called Cricket.
We also find out some more details about his neighborhood as well as his family as well, which kind of play into here with information either for or against this argument. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you the evidence for why Rusty might be poor and then the evidence against why he might not be poor. And then I'll let you know how I feel at the end of it, and I want to know what you guys think as well in that comment section down below.
Hang on.
But of course, if you are new here and you love Bluey as much as I do, don't forget to hit that like button down below as well as that subscribe button and that bell for notifications so you know when any other Bluey content comes out. So let's start off with not just Rusty's house, but also his bio on the official Bluey webpage as well. So on this, you can see that he's meant to be from the bush, but as we see in the episode Cricket, that's not the case. He doesn't live in the bush at all. He actually lives pretty much in the middle of Brisbane. And we know this from the person who actually animated Rusty's house, and that is Alice Walsh, one of the animators on Bluey. Now, she put up a lot of information on both Instagram and Twitter about the inspiration for the house, how it is a fibro shack and not a Queenslander or brick style house like Bluey's or Mackenzie's. And she also let us know that it's around the Enoggera area, which makes sense because that's around where the Brisbane Army barracks are as well. And we know, of course, that Rusty's dad is in the army. So it looks like they're not out bush, but instead in the middle of the city. And this idea of like a fibro shack house is really interesting because these are called post-war homes in Brisbane. They're typically only 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and they were specifically built after the 1940s and World War II to be cheap housing to help with the housing crisis at the time. We're gonna come back to the housing crisis in Australia as well in a second. But the whole idea of it is that they're made really cheaply. They're small houses on a big plot of land, which is exactly what we see with Rusty's house. Small house, big plot of land, enough room for him to play cricket, but not a fancy kind of home or anything like that. But first, real quick, a word from today's sponsor. If you are ever injured and you have no idea where to start, with Morgan & Morgan, it is so easy. Submitting a claim for an injury doesn't have to be a stuffy process. In 8 clicks or less, you can submit a claim to Morgan & Morgan. A lawyer will review your case and you can text them easily to discuss it, as well as sign contracts, upload documents, and look at claim details all from your cell phone. So remember, if you are ever injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Literally, you can submit a claim in 8 clicks or less without ever having to leave your couch. For more information, go to forthepeople.com or dial #law. That's #529 from your cell phone. Okay, back to the video. We also see that Rusty and his older brother Digger share a bedroom, which again would make sense if it's only a 2-bedroom, possibly 3-bedroom home max. The boys, of course, would then have to share a bedroom, and they're in bunk beds as well, which is, I think, just like a really cute extra fact in the show that they're in bunk beds, but it does suggest that, yeah, Rusty has to share with his brother for a reason.
But we didn't know about Rusty's kitchen.
We also see Rusty's mum washing the dishes by hand, so obviously they don't have a dishwasher. Again, very stereotypical for these types of homes as well. A lot of them are very old-fashioned. They haven't been updated really since the 1940s. So yeah, a lot of them don't have dishwashers in them. The outside of the house as well looks kind of worn away. We can see, especially when Rusty's like practicing on the side of the wall, either he's worn that wall away by him just like hitting the ball against it, but it just in general looks a little bit more weathered. Then as well, if we look at the local neighborhood park in comparison to a lot of the neighborhood parks around Bluey's house, they seem pretty different. The neighborhood park where Rusty plays cricket with his older brother, it has a cement cricket pitch, but the park in general looks a little bit more worn down. It's not really as well kept as we've seen in other parks, specifically the one in this episode as well, in Watonga Park. So just the park itself also gives that little bit of a vibe that maybe this neighborhood isn't as high class as perhaps other neighborhoods are in Brisbane. So all of this together kind of makes it seem like, yeah, his parents can't really afford a large house. They're in maybe a not so great neighborhood. So it really kind of gives you that idea that maybe their socioeconomic situation is a lot lower than Bluey's. But let's have a look at some of the evidence then against this as well.
Run! Hey, come back here!
So we know that Rusty's dad works in the army, but his mum also works. And while this is never said outright, it's pretty heavily implied in the episode Cricket when they say that Rusty's dad can't pick him up from school, so he has to go home with Jack.
But what we didn't know was that when Rusty's dad was away, he'd get a lift home with his mate Jack. Rusty played at Jack's a lot that year.
which would mean then why can't his mum pick him up from school? Most likely because she's working. That does mean then that both of his parents earn an income. Rusty also goes to Calypso School, which is a Steiner school. It is a private-based school, not a public school. So again, that would cost a lot more money. So, okay, they have enough money obviously to send Rusty to that school. And then we come back to that whole idea of Rusty being from the bush. So perhaps they also have a property out in the bush and they decided to move into the city for the kids to go to school. Based on Rusty and his brother's age, his brother, who seems to be around the same age as Captain Amir, would be going into high school. So of course they'd want to move closer to the city so he could go to high school. But then Rusty as well is also starting grade 1. So again, perfect timing for them to move closer into the city. And Dusty, we're assuming, is maybe around the age of like 3 or 4. So I mean, she's going to start school eventually, but if the two boys have to start school, then it would make sense for them to move into the city, which means then that they had to most likely buy a house, and they chose to buy one near the army barracks in Enogra. And you would think, again, based off the house, that it is meant to be a cheap house, and 4 years ago, it was. It was only around $182,000. However, in real life time right now in 2023, which again, we know the show kind of like follows along with the real life schedule of time. We've seen it from the episode movies. This same house that 4 years ago was $182,000 is now 10 times that amount, going for $1.1 million for, again, a 2-bedroom home. I cannot stress enough the fact that there is a massive housing crisis in Australia, and that within 4 years, this pretty much a fibro shack has jumped in 10 times the price. 4 years ago, you could buy 10 of these houses, and now you can buy one. So yeah, the house that Rusty lives in is technically $1 million home. Now, if we want to compare this then to Bluey's house over in the Red Hill area, or Mackenzie's house as well, which we know is also close by, Bluey's house these days is going for anywhere between 1 to 1.7 million, and Mackenzie's house is around that 1.2 million mark. So again, they're pretty close to the same cost as Rusty's house as well, even though technically where Bluey and Mackenzie live is closer to the inner city. And just to like add on some extra sort of levels, let's look at Muffin's house too. We know that it's based in Wavell Heights because Bluey Locations got a tip off that that's where the house that they based it off was from. And if we look on realestate.com.au, we can also see the prices of houses that have pools in that area. And again, most of them go for between $1.6 to $3 million. So even on like the lower end of the scale, that's still kind of close to the $1.1, $1.2 million house that Rusty lives in. So even though all the different styles of houses look very different, have different sized bedrooms, are more modern than the others, the cost is almost the exact same. Which means then that technically, Rusty is not any poorer than the rest of his friends at school.
Oh.
But just that his parents wanted to live closer to the army barracks, and the houses there just happened to cost even more money than the houses in other further out areas perhaps. But it means that they made that choice. Even though they have all that money, they could have bought a nicer house closer to the city. They chose instead to go near the army barracks in Enogra, in the fibro shack, even though yes, we know that that was Joe Brum's influence. He wanted a different looking house. Either way, that was where they chose to be. So that's the information for why Rusty maybe isn't poor. I gave you all the information at the start as to why he might actually be poor. And again, a lot of this is just based on the current housing prices in Australia right now. If we were to do this 4 years ago, then yeah, I think that we could probably say that Rusty is poorer than his friends because there was a much bigger gap back then. His house would have been 182,000, but Bluey's house would have been closer to 500 or 600, and of course Muffin's would be around that 1 million mark still. But things have changed in Australia. So, cheeky dogs, what do you think? When do you want to base this timeline off? Do you think that Rusty is poorer than his friends, or do you think that he's the exact same and his parents just chose to live closer to his dad's work and that's the price of living there? Let me know in that comment section down below. I would love to know your thoughts on this. And like I said, this is Rusty week. I have already done a bunch of videos as well. I've made a whole playlist for the Rusty based videos too, so you can click that on the link up here. But as I said as well, if you love Bluey and specifically Rusty as much as I do, don't forget to hit the like button down below, as well as that subscribe button and that bell for notifications. And until the next video, which is going to be tomorrow, it is a Rusty family tree video. I have picked you cheeky dogs out a few other videos that maybe you would like to watch, and I will see you all in another video. Mwah! Bye!